The first time I realized my wife was a monster was not when she served me with divorce papers, but when I saw our wedding album photoshopped onto the desk of her new lover. It was a Tuesday, the kind of bland beige Tuesday that seems designed for disappointment. The air in my cramped new apartment was stale, smelling of takeout and self-pity. My lawyer, a relentlessly cheerful man named Ben, whose optimism was both his greatest asset and most annoying trait, had emailed me a pre-discovery package. His subject line read, "Gird your loins, Michael." It's a weird one. I clicked open the attachment, expecting spreadsheets of inflated expenses or claims about a non-existent inheritance. I was not prepared for the high-resolution image that filled my screen. It was a photograph of a man I recognized as Charles Whitlock, a sleek venture capitalist with a jawline sharper than his business ethics, sitting at his mahogany desk. But in the silver frame beside his computer monitor, beaming out from a happier time, was a picture of him and my wife, Lila, on our wedding day. Except my face had been meticulously erased from the photo, and Charles's had been seamlessly grafted onto my body, my tuxedo, my pose holding Lila's waist as we cut the cake. My own smile, digitally scrubbed from existence. My place taken. It was a violation so profound, so petty, it stole the air from my lungs. That photo was more than an image. It was a sacred artifact of a covenant she had not just broken, but was now actively defiling. I stared at the pixelated ghost of myself, a hollowed-out shell in my own memory, and felt a cold, hard certainty crystallize in my gut. This was not going to be a divorce. It was going to be a war of annihilation. The Lila I married was an artist. Not the kind with a dusty studio and paint-splattered smocks, but a curator of life. She could walk into a thrift store and emerge with a vase that looked like a forgotten Art Deco masterpiece. She could arrange a handful of wildflowers in a mason jar and make it look like a still life from a Dutch master. She built our home, our life, into a beautiful, curated collection of moments and objects. I was the architect, the provider, the man with the solid, dependable job who built the stage. She was the visionary who made it sing with light and color and meaning. I loved her for it. I loved the way she'd hum in the kitchen, the way she'd remember the exact shade of blue I liked best on the walls, the way she made our house feel like a sanctuary against the world. But the artist's eye, I was beginning to understand, could also be a predator's gaze. It could assess, covet, and claim, with a terrifying, singular focus. The beautiful life we'd built together was now, in her mind, a collection of assets to be acquired. And I was merely an obstacle in her way. Ben's office was all glass and chrome, a stark contrast to the warm, textured home Lila and I had shared. "It's bizarre, Michael. I'll give you that," Ben said, steepling his fingers. "Morally bankrupt. But is it legally relevant? It speaks to character. Certainly. But the judge is going to be more interested in hard assets. The house. Retirement accounts. Investments. She's claiming she's entitled to the entire proceeds from the sale of my startup," I said, my voice tight. "The one I founded 2 years before I even met her. She's calling it a marital asset because I managed it during the marriage. Pensahil. She's going for the sweat equity argument, that her support as a spouse allowed you to grow it. We'll fight it. But Michael, she's also filed a motion for exclusive use of the marital home, and she's listing its contents in an inventory that is extensive." He slid another document across the polished desk. It was 12 pages long, single-spaced. I scanned the items, my disbelief growing with each line. 1. One set of Wedgwood china, Avalon pattern. We'd received that as a wedding gift from my grandmother. Lila had always said it was stuffy and old-fashioned. 1. Oil painting, unsigned, landscape. A piece we'd found together at a flea market on a rainy weekend in Vermont. We'd haggled for it, laughing, and spent the rest of the day wrapped in blankets, making up stories about the artist. 1. Custom-built oak bookshelf, floor to ceiling. I had built that with my own hands, board by board, in the garage of our first home. My thumbprint was permanently stained into the wood grain from a misplaced hammer strike. 1. Antique brass compass, circa 1920s. A gift from me to her on our first anniversary. The card had read, "So you can always find your way back to me." It wasn't just the big things. It was the small, intimate things. The quilt from her childhood bed that she'd claim she hated but secretly slept with every night. The set of chef's knives I'd saved for months to buy her. Even the goddamn ceramic cookie jar shaped like a fat owl that we'd named Archimedes. She can't be serious, I whispered, the pages trembling in my hand. This is everything. This is every single thing we own. She's claiming these items are personally significant to her, integral to her daily life and emotional well-being, Ben said, his tone neutral. It's a strategy. Inflate the initial claim, then negotiate down. But Michael, it's aggressive. It's designed to exhaust you. Exhaustion was too gentle a word. It felt like evisceration. She wasn't just taking my future. She was trying to erase my past, to claim every shared memory as her sole property. The first court hearing was a cold procedural affair. Lila sat on the other side of the aisle, flanked by her lawyer, a severe woman with a razor-cut bob and a perpetual frown. Lila looked impeccable. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a chic ponytail. She looked like the picture of composed, wounded grace. She didn't look at me once. Her lawyer, Miss Croft, did all the talking. Her voice was a dry, precise instrument, each word a scalpel. Your Honor, my client dedicated the prime of her life to building a home and a life with the respondent. She sacrificed her own burgeoning career in interior design to support his entrepreneurial endeavors. The home and its contents are not merely things. They are the physical manifestation of her life's work, her creative output, her emotional sanctuary. To remove her would be an act of profound cruelty. I felt my jaw clench. Sacrificed her career? She'd freelanced for a few months before deciding it was too much stress. Supported my endeavors? She'd called my startup my midlife crisis in code and complained about the long hours. My lawyer argued our side, pointing out the prenuptial agreement we'd signed, which Lila was now contesting, claiming she'd signed under duress, and the separate nature of my company. The judge, a weary-looking man with deep-set eyes, listened patiently but offered little. He granted Lila temporary exclusive use of the house, pending the full trial, and ordered a full appraisal of all assets. As we filed out of the courtroom, I finally caught Lila's eye. There was no guilt there, no sadness, just a cool, assessing glint. Like a collector examining a piece they intended to acquire, she gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile before turning away. The war had begun in earnest. The following weeks were a special kind of hell. Every interaction was a skirmish. We had to meet with a court-appointed evaluator to inventory the house. Walking through those familiar rooms with a stranger holding a clipboard, while Lila pointed out items with the detached air of a museum docent, was a unique form of torture. This rug is a one-of-a-kind Berber, she said, her voice smooth. I sourced it from a market in Marrakesh. The emotional value is significant. We'd bought that rug from a high-end store in the city. I'd been there. I had the credit card statement to prove it. She pointed to a photograph on the mantel, a picture of us hiking in Glacier National Park, our faces wind-chapped and happy. That was taken on the first day we said, "I love you," she told the evaluator, her voice dropping to a heartfelt whisper. It was a lie. We'd first said it months before, curled up on my old apartment's couch. The hike had been just a hike. But she was weaving a new narrative, stitching herself as the heartbroken romantic heroine of our story. And every object was a prop in her performance. The most brutal fight was over my books. I am a voracious reader. My books, first editions, dog-eared paperbacks, textbooks from college, novels inscribed by friends were my history. They were my quiet companions. Lila had never been much of a reader. The library is a core part of the home's aesthetic, she argued when I protested. It represents a shared intellectual life. You hated most of these books, I finally exploded during one mediated session. You called my copy of Catch-22 an eyesore. You wanted to paint over the shelves and put decorative vases there. She didn't flinch. She just looked at the mediator with a pained expression. He's rewriting history because he's angry, she said softly. It's a common phase. The library is very important to me. I was losing. Not just in the legal sense, but in a psychological one. She was gaslighting me with the very walls of our home. And the court, in its sterile way, was believing her performance of grief over my raw, messy reality. The pressure mounted. My work suffered. I'd sit at my desk and stare at the code on my screen, but all I could see was the inventory list. My friends grew tired of my obsession. It's just stuff, Mike, they'd say. Let it go. Start over. But it wasn't just stuff. It was the physical evidence of a life lived, of a love that had been real, at least to me. Letting her have it felt like admitting that our entire marriage had been a fiction she had authored alone. The true turning point came on a rainy Sunday. I was going through a box of old files I'd salvaged from the garage, looking for anything receipts, old emails, photos that could prove my claims against her fabricated stories. I was looking for a paper trail for the goddamn Berber rug. Buried beneath old tax returns was a small, locked, fireproof box. I'd forgotten about it. It contained our passports, our social security cards, and the USB drive. It was a small, black, unremarkable thumb drive. I stared at it for a long time, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I remembered it now. Years ago, when my startup was just taking off, I'd been paranoid about data security. I'd made a full encrypted backup of everything, every business plan, every line of code, every financial projection, and stored it here. A failsafe. I'd told Lila about it once, jokingly calling it the keys to the kingdom. She'd laughed and forgotten about it. So had I. With trembling hands, I plugged it into my laptop. The encryption software was old, but my password still worked. The drive contained folders upon folders of data. And then, something else. A folder I didn't recognize, labeled L. A sick feeling curdled in my stomach. I clicked it open. Inside were spreadsheets. Meticulous, cold, and devastating. They were dated from over a year ago, long before she'd asked for the divorce. One was a list of all our assets, with estimated values and a percentage column titled Projected Settlement. Another was a timeline, a step-by-step plan. Step 4. Secure emotional leverage via couples counseling. Record sessions, if possible. Step 7. Initiate divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional neglect. There were notes on my character, my vulnerabilities, Michael's primary weakness, sentimentality. Use attachment to home objects as a bargaining chip for financial concessions. It was a blueprint, a battle plan. Our marriage had been a subsidiary of her larger enterprise, and she had been planning its liquidation for over a year. But the final file broke me. It was a scanned document, a mock-up of a prenuptial agreement. Our real prenup was straightforward, but this one was different. It was watermarked with the logo of a law firm I didn't recognize. It was far more aggressive, granting her virtually everything in the event of a divorce. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. It was a damn good forgery, but it was a forgery. She hadn't just been planning to take everything. She'd been planning to fabricate evidence to make it legal. The USB drive was her original plan, before she'd decided to contest the actual prenup instead. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment, the rain hammering against the windows, and I cried. Not soft tears of self-pity, but great, heaving sobs of rage and grief and betrayal, so complete it felt like dying. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was not just greedy or angry. She was a master strategist of ruin. She was a ghost who had been living in my house, wearing my wife's skin, and waiting for the right moment to pick my bones clean. The emotion that rose out of the ashes of that grief was not sadness. It was a cold, clear, and focused fury. She wanted a war? Fine. But she had just handed me her playbook. I didn't go to Ben. Not yet. I knew that the moment this evidence was introduced, her lawyers would pounce, claiming I'd fabricated it, that it was inadmissible, that it was stolen. I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. I hired a private investigator. His name was Leo, a grizzled former cop with a cynical eye and a surprisingly gentle demeanor. "Seen it all, son," he'd grunted when I showed him the drive. "Love makes people stupid. Greed makes them stupid and cruel. Let's see what your Picasso of pain has been really up to." What Leo found in the following weeks was a masterpiece of duplicity. The photoshopped wedding photo was just the tip of the iceberg. Lila and Charles Whitlock had been involved for nearly 2 years. They had taken trips together. Using my air miles, he had been financing her legal battle. But the most damning discovery was a shell company, an LLC registered in Delaware under a meaningless name. Its sole purpose appeared to be the acquisition of art and antiques. "It's a funnel," Leo explained, pointing to a complex web of transactions on his screen. "She's not just arguing for the stuff because she loves it. She and this Whitlock character are planning to liquidate it. High-end, no questions asked private sales. That unsigned oil painting you found at a flea market? Whitlock had it appraised by a contact at Sotheby's. It's a lost minor work by Albert Bierstadt, worth over $500,000. The floor dropped out from under me. The Vermont trip, her lucky find, it had all been a setup. She must have known. She'd used my sentimentality, our shared memory, to hide a valuable asset in plain sight, waiting for the day she could claim it as her own and cash it in. It wasn't just the painting. My first edition of The Great Gatsby, targeted. The antique compass, targeted. Even the Wedgwood china was on a list of items to be sold to a collector in Japan. Her entire emotional performance in court, the tears over the quilt, the heartfelt stories about the bookshelf, was a lie. It was all about money. Our entire life had been reduced to an inventory for a fire sale to fund her new life with Charles. The final court date arrived. The air in the courtroom was thick with finality. Lila looked more victorious than ever, wearing a sharp black suit that looked both funereal and predatory. She finally looked at me, and her eyes held a flat, smug triumph. Her lawyer, Miss Croft, stood and began her closing arguments. It was a performance of Shakespearean proportions. She painted Lila as the devoted wife, the heartbroken victim, the artist whose very soul was tied to the home she had created. She spoke of my emotional abandonment, my workaholism, my failure to nurture the marital bond. She requested not just the house and all its contents, but a massive, punitive alimony payment and a huge portion of my company. When she finished, the judge looked at Ben. "Your response, counselor?" Ben stood up. He did not look cheerful anymore. He looked grim and determined. "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, my client's case has been predicated on one central idea, that Ms. Lila O'Connell is a sentimental woman fighting for the cherished artifacts of a failed marriage. What we will show you today is that this is the most cynical, premeditated fraud this court is likely to ever see." He approached the bench. "We would like to submit new evidence. Exhibit A, a digital timeline and planning document created by the petitioner over 18 months ago, detailing her strategy for this divorce." Lila's smug expression didn't falter, but I saw the blood drain from Charles Whitlock's face in the gallery. "Objection." Ms. Croft was on her feet. "This evidence is fraudulent, stolen, and inadmissible. The evidence was discovered by my client in a jointly owned safe deposit box, Your Honor," Ben said smoothly, lying with perfect conviction. "It pertains directly to the petitioner's state of mind and her intentions regarding marital assets." The judge overruled the objection. As Ben began to walk the court through the spreadsheets, the timeline, the forged prenup, the room grew deathly quiet. I watched Lila. Her composure began to crack. The mask of wounded grace slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not triumph, but pure, undiluted hate. Then Ben brought out the big guns. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that the petitioner's claims of sentimental attachment are not only fabricated, but are part of a conspiracy to defraud my client. We submit Exhibit B, financial records linking the petitioner's associate, Mr. Charles Whitlock, to a shell corporation designed to liquidate the very assets she claims to hold dear." He presented the appraisals, the LLC documents, the communications between Lila and Charles discussing the Bierstadt acquisition and the Japanese China deal. The courtroom erupted. Ms. Croft was objecting constantly, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. The judge's gavel came down like a gunshot. Lila was white as a sheet, whispering frantically to her lawyer. Ben saved the coup de grace for last. He turned to Lila. "Ms. O'Connell, you testified under oath that the oil painting in your living room was of profound emotional significance, a token of a happy weekend with your husband. Is that correct?" Lila, cornered, could only nod. "And you would never part with it?" "Never," she whispered. Ben held up the Sotheby's appraisal, commissioned by Whitlock. "Then can you explain why your partner, Mr. Whitlock, had this profoundly significant painting appraised for private sale 6 months ago?" The silence was absolute. It was the checkmate move. She had perjured herself in the most blatant, greedy way possible. The judge didn't even need to recess. His face was a thundercloud. He looked at Lila with a disgust so profound it seemed to physically push her down in her seat. "This is the most egregious case of bad faith I have witnessed in my 20 years on the bench," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "The petitioner has not only attempted to perpetrate a fraud on this court, but has shown a breathtaking cruelty toward the respondent. The motion for asset distribution is denied in its entirety." He awarded me the house. He awarded me every single item on her inventory list. He upheld our original prenuptial agreement, denying her any claim to my company and awarding her zero alimony. He even awarded me legal fees. Then he turned his gaze on Charles Whitlock. "And I am referring the evidence of conspiracy and attempted fraud to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." It was a total, absolute rout. I stood there, numb, as the gavel fell for the last time. The victory was so complete it felt hollow, anticlimactic. There was no joy in it, only a vast, desolate emptiness. Lila stood up. The beautiful, curated facade was gone. Her face was twisted into something ugly and raw. She walked over to me, ignoring Ben, ignoring everyone. She leaned in close, her perfume the same one I'd loved for a decade now, smelling like poison. "You think you won?" she hissed, her voice trembling with venom. "You think any of that stuff matters? You're a hollow man, Michael. You have your things. You have your empty house. But you have nothing. You never did." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking a final, angry tattoo on the polished floor. Charles Whitlock scrambled after her. "I got everything. The house, the books, the painting, the china, the compass, the quilt, the cookie jar. The movers brought it all back and placed it in the rooms where it belonged. I now lived in a museum of a dead life. Every object was tainted. The bookshelf I'd built now seemed like a monument to my own naivety. The painting was no longer a beautiful landscape. It was a wanted poster for my own gullibility. The compass would never point true north again. It would only point to the moment I learned the woman I loved was a stranger. I sat on the floor in the living room, surrounded by the physical evidence of my victory, and I felt the emotional weight of my loss finally, fully, crush me. I had been so focused on not letting her steal my past that I hadn't realized she had already destroyed my future. The things were just things. They were silent, inert witnesses. They held the ghost of the love I'd felt, but not the love itself. That was gone. That had been a fiction. Weeks later, a small package arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the photograph, the real one, from our wedding day, the one she had photoshopped. In this version, I was still there, my face young and stupid and brimming with a love so absolute it felt like a physical pain to look at it. We were both there, frozen in a perfect, beautiful lie. She had kept it, and now she was sending it back. I turned it over. On the back, in her elegant, familiar handwriting, she had written a single line: "You can have the proof. I'll keep the truth." And in that moment, I understood the final, cruelest twist of her theft. She hadn't just tried to steal my things. She had stolen the meaning behind them. She had taken the truth of our love, whatever fragile truth it had been, and corrupted it into her own narrative. She had left me with the hollow artifacts, the empty proof of a happiness that, in her hands, had perhaps never been real at all. I held the photograph for a long time. Then I carefully, deliberately, tore it in half. I tore my smiling face away from hers. I placed my half back in the tissue paper. I took her half, and I walked to the fireplace. I watched her face curl and blacken in the flames, until there was nothing left but ash. It was a small, symbolic act. It wouldn't heal me. The house was still full of ghosts, but it was a start. It was the first thing I had chosen to let go of. The road ahead was long and lonely, but it was mine, and for the first time it was completely, utterly real.